Hey guys, it's Brian Law from Press for Truth, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about the upcoming Eurozone bailout that is currently being discussed right now with the Eurozone leaders meeting. What they're basically discussing is using tax money, taxpayer money from the European people to bail out all of these banks that got themselves into this problem, mainly the Rothschild-controlled central banks in Europe. The European Central Bank is owned in majority share by the Rothschild banking dynasty, one of the oldest and most powerful banking dynasties, if not the most powerful banking dynasty in the world. And once again, they are asking the public to bail them out now that they've gotten themselves into a funk where countries like Italy and Spain and Greece specifically is the big one right now don't have enough money to pay back the debt that they owe to the private bankers. So just like they did with the $700 billion bailout in the United States in 2008, they are looking to the taxpayer again to front the cash to pay these private bankers instead of going directly after the source of the problem, which is the private banking institutions that charge interest on their fiat-based currencies. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next few days and what happens with that and whether or not they're able to hold this Eurozone together. Because some other ideas that they've been discussing are to basically form a political union, which we've been talking about at Press for Truth for years, that starting off with getting rid of the borders and trade harmonizations and things that led up to the European Union being formed, which was a financial union, is now being discussed. Well, now that we've already come this far, why don't we just have a political union? Why don't we have, members of the European Parliament that are already elected hold basically no power, and they're only in power for a certain amount of time. You have Bilderbergers like Herman Van Rompuy that are in control of the European Parliament and are not elected by the people, but are elected by these unelected oligarchs who appoint their own Bilderberg rulers basically to take over at the stand and implement policies that are beneficial to them. Now, when I was on here last time, I talked a little bit about the influence of Bilderberg members in starting up wars around the world, and I'd like to go into a little bit more detail with that about how they fund these black operations or these wars of aggression that they start. If you look back at the Central Intelligence Agency, and actually even back further to the British Empire, one of the oldest methods for bringing in cash into the British Empire back through the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries was the opium and the drug trade. The British Empire was the crown jewel of the British Empire to bring in opium and sell it before it was illegal to sell those types of drugs or before they were made illegal. The Central Intelligence Agency does the same thing with drugs like marijuana, cocaine, and opium, which can be turned into various derivatives like heroin or other painkillers. Now, if you look at the where the opium comes from, one of the biggest producers of opium is Afghanistan. And if you look at the output of opium and the increase of heroin production since the Afghanistan war started back in 2001, it's gone up exponentially. So they're not actually stopping the funding of which they claim they're using. The drug money is used to fund terrorist cells in Al-Qaeda, which in essence is created by the Central Intelligence Agency as well. But the main source of all of that opium goes towards funding what they call black operations. And essentially what a black operation is an operation that happens outside of congressional oversight. If the CIA or any other national department needs funds to do something, they have to go through congressional oversight through the Senate and the House committee to appropriate funds to allow them to do this. However, if they don't have any of that money available, they do something that's called a black operation, where they fund it using money that is financed through illegal means, such as the drug trade or the weapons trade that they're deeply, deeply involved in. Now, these black operations and funding wars of aggression with illegal drug and weapons money goes way back in history. We can see it with the founding members of the Skull and Bones. They were involved with the opium trade. And if you look back at the Air America scandal, where the CIA was flying in most of the cocaine that was coming into the country. If you look back at the way crack cocaine was distributed in Los Angeles, it was distributed by the Central Intelligence Agency, and those funds go back to fund their black operations in various countries all over the world. And you can see it with all sorts of different things. And the other flip side to the coin is that they have agencies that fight this alleged war on drugs that was started back in George Bush Sr.'s era, where he and his wife were parading around the country talking about how they were going to battle the drug intake. Meanwhile, he used to be the Central Intelligence Agency director and actually was involved in bringing in a lot of these drugs personally. So when I see things like bath salts that are all over the news these days, it makes me wonder, where did that come from? Where did this synthetic drug come from that is basically, if you look at it from a law enforcement perspective, is a wonder drug for helping to back up new laws that are going to be put in place to enforce drug possession, because they could make the case that, here's an example, a guy, chewed somebody's face off because he took a drug. We need to make sure that we have more funding to stop the flow of these drugs. But we don't even really know where these synthetic drugs are coming from. But if you look at the history of where other synthetic drugs have come from, a lot of them have been financed and pushed through by groups like the Central Intelligence Agency. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some involvement at that level. But other than that, guys, that's all I really wanted to talk about today, is just a little bit about how the Bilderberg Group and other elites in that position, the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies around the world, use the drug trade and the illegal black operations money to fund these wars of aggression that we're seeing. And we're probably going to see the same thing happening in Syria, and we're probably going to see the same thing happening between Turkey and Syria now that there's a potential war going on in that area of the world. And beyond that, I guess I'll talk to you guys later, and just keep an eye on what's going on in Europe as well with this European bailout, because I think the bankers are up to something. And we need to let these financial institutions fail so that we can rebuild true public banking systems, not private banking systems that don't loan out 400 times what they have in their accounts, and don't use fiat-based interest currencies where they basically create a slave market from everybody in the world that's borrowing money from them.